Let's talk about Accounting Today's 2025 Year Ahead Survey. I've got a list of 7 stats from this survey that I really enjoyed. They surveyed 291 accounting professionals. 65% were CPA firms, 19% non-CPA accounting firms, and then 16% tax-only firms. So it skews towards CPA firms, and there's a broad range of sizes, skewing more towards the under 20, which is, most of the profession is firms under that number. So what are the key takeaways so you don't have to read it yourself? Let's talk about revenue growth. 69% of firms expect revenue growth of at least 4%. I would hope they would have revenue growth of 4% because that's only a little bit more than the inflation rate. But 24%, so almost a quarter, anticipate double-digit growth, 10% or more. What about advisory work? We keep hearing about how important advisory work is. We're actually spending less time on advisory work than last year. So 31% of firms spent less time on it this year.
Are they getting more efficient?
And they spent more on compliance work.
Are they more efficient at the advisory, or is it just there's so much compliance work?
I think there's just so much compliance work. And also, my feeling is that if you do compliance work well, it's very profitable and it's very scalable. And so while there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with doing advisory, it's a great business. If I were building a firm again, I would be focusing on compliance services. All right, so how about hiring? Half of firms are going to hire in 2025, but they're only going to hire half as many people compared to 2024. And when it comes to remote employees, 62% of firms refuse to hire any remote employees, like fully remote employees.
So more than half of all people surveyed says their firm will not hire a remote employee.
Yeah. And that's a 10% increase over last year. So we are moving away from remote work. Now, that still means that 38% of firms will consider hiring a fully remote employee. And actually, while we're on that, what is the breakdown of remote versus hybrid versus in-office in public accounting? 56% that work full-time in the office. So a little over half work full-time in the office, all the time, all the employees. And that's an increase of 4% from last year. About a quarter of firms, 24%, have hybrid arrangements. And then another 20% have fully remote. But that's a decrease. It used to be 25%. So we're down to 20% of accounting firms in this country, or surveyed by Accounting Today, are fully remote.
And you said that's down 5% from the
Yes.
year before? And I imagine that was down 10% from the year before and 20% from the year before because we were in COVID times.
Right.
Like, is this trending to zero?
I don't think so.
No.
I think we're just normalizing. That's my feel. Because before COVID, it was like less than 10% of firms were fully remote. And we doubled that number essentially, which is a lot. So I would just say this is like going, normalizing back to the trend. But, if you're a firm that hires fully remote, like there's a lot of people who want those jobs. So you actually have an advantage compared to firms that require in office. But we also saw from the earlier data point that firms are hiring fewer people compared to last year. So if you need fewer people, you can be pickier about where they work. Basically, supply and demand kind of situation, right?
Yep.
Let's talk about IT spending, tech spending. Over half of firms are going to increase their IT spending in 2025. It's actually 60%, and that's up 10% in previous years. And get this, technology as a percentage of the firm's budget, so percentage of expenses is what I'm taking this to mean, it's 21% now. 21% of your firm's budget goes to tech. That's way higher than when I had my firm, even just, that was in like 2014, 2015 when I sold that. I mean, that's amazing. And larger firms spend even more. 30% or more of their budget is IT and technology. It sounds like you have some thoughts on that,
I'm
David.
wondering how much of that is because, A, we're adopting new technology, or is it just a lot of the apps, once they know they're established in a firm, they start raising the prices? Maybe it's a mix of both.
Price inflation? Yeah. Well, you would think, though, that if like you've always said, David, whenever QuickBooks raises its prices, That should be your trigger to raise your prices
prices.
in your firm. So then if your prices are going up along with the tech spend, you would expect it to stay a similar ratio, a similar proportion. But it's actually growing. And that to me indicates that firms are figuring out how to do more work with tech and less with people. And it helps to solve the talent crisis. How else are firms going to keep up? If they can't hire people, they're going to buy software to do the work faster.
They're finally figuring out how to do it with tech. Yeah, that promise of replacing bodies.
Allison says, why fewer people? Is that because firms are taking on less work, or just that they have been trying to find people in 2024 and had a tough time? I don't know. Maybe it could be a lot of things. Could be that, like we just talked about, technology means they don't have to hire as many people. Maybe AI is starting to have an impact on firms. Maybe everybody just like hired a lot of people last year for whatever reason, and now we're just naturally pulling back. I'd be curious to know the answers. And if you're listening, if you're on YouTube or on LinkedIn with us as we stream here, let us know. Is your firm hiring fewer people? Are you hiring more? And if so, why? Okay, last stat, still on the technology theme. How many firms are using AI tools? It's 23% of firms right now that responded to the survey. 23% of firms are using AI tools, which is kind of like what I would expect, actually. Although it's pretty much the same as when I surveyed my speaking conference attendees, like when I went and did speaking sessions and I surveyed the live audience at a lot of these conferences with a lot of CPA firm attendees, I would only get maybe 20% of the audience saying that they'd actually used AI. Now, it's only 23% using AI tools, but a third are exploring the technologies. So add those two together and you get half of firms are either using them now or exploring using them. So we should see rapid growth in AI adoption in firms over the next few years. All right, that is all of my stats from the Accounting Today Year Ahead